Okay, well, here we are on Sunday. Everybody had a great day yesterday. I know I did. We're going to cover today the 6 principles again. We're going to talk about the water cycle and how important it is to life on Earth. Talk about stormwater management. How did we get into this mess? Talk a little bit about ecosystem services, those kind of things. And then still up at the kind of higher nesting doll level, looking at community design, green urbanism, those kinds of things, in part for the planning students, but also because you need to understand the context in which your little site is being designed. Even if you're just doing, an acre property, where's this water going? Where's the water coming from? How does it contribute to a larger ecosystem? So we're going to talk about community design and stuff like that. And then we'll talk about assignment number 2 later on. Was that right? Assignment 2? No, we're going to talk about assignment 1. I'm getting ahead of myself. There we go. Okay, so I'd like to review the same slides that we had yesterday to talk about these 6 principles. And so your assignment number 2 is going to be selecting a project that you use the 6 principles to evaluate. How well did they apply these principles? So what I'd like to do today is go through each of the 6, and we'll talk about ways that a project might reflect that. So like Camden Yards is one of the projects that people have done. The National Stadium, that was supposed to be fairly green down in southeast DC. Projects like that. So how well did they do in doing these things, and how did they do it? Okay. So biomimicry. Oh, actually I have a video for that. So remember what we talked about biomimicry is we are mimicking a process of nature. Okay? Sometimes this is a hard concept to grasp. So I'll do it with a funny little thing I saw in Sierra magazine. Full disclosure, my brother-in-law is one of the senior editors at Sierra magazine. They showed this bug in Africa. So like water's hard to come by in Africa, right? In the deserts, there's not much water. So this bug has a little apparatus on its backside that looks like a double helix kind of thing that captures the humidity, what little there is from the air, captures the humidity and brings it down into the bug's body. Because scientists were like, how do these bugs survive in the desert? This is crazy. All living things need water. How do they do it? So the humans devised the same device, used the same geometry and everything, and guess what? Gallons a day they're creating in the desert with no power. Just by mimicking something in nature that knew how to solve the problem. And frankly, nature can solve all kinds of problems. I know I use a lot of movie references, but one of my favorite movies is I Am Legend with Will Smith. And the basic pretense is some virus has gotten out and it makes people into bad zombie creatures. And he's one of the few that's alive, and he's immune, and of course he's a doctor, and all these things. But that whole storyline aside, you get to see New York City as it goes back, Hollywood's version of as it goes back to plants. Because people have been mostly gone, for a long enough time. Trees are growing up through the pavement, and, there's vegetation everywhere. And I love those shots because nature's going to keep going when we're not here. So I'm not worried so much about nature. You know what I mean? It's resiliency. It is very, very resilient. So in that respect, you know, how can we learn from it using these principles and mimic what it does? So I have a video to show you what it's not. So they did these robots. Got sound here, got sound here. I don't think there's any sound, but anyway. So they did these robots. That one is particularly cool. That fly. Okay. Well, I guess this isn't totally not biomimicry because they're mimicking the kinetic motion of those species. I guess if it was not just for fun, you know, it's like, okay, we've learned this, now what are we going to do with it? What's it going to do to help people? So that's I guess the part of the equation that's missing in this for me. But anyway, but cool stuff. And I love coming across things like this because I go, oh my God, look at what these smart people are doing. It gives me hope, right? That we're going to figure this out. It's going to, you know, it's going to come together. So many smart people out there. Way smarter than me. And I appreciate that about them. So in order to make this work, we've got to figure out how to, you know, do this biomimicry thing. So what's probably the one thing that would come to mind on a site? You're evaluating a project and you're like, okay, I got to come up with something on how this reflects or does not reflect, and then could reflect, because remember you have to have 3 retrofits. So say your project, you know, let's use that shopping center out in Bowie. Very typical shopping center, massive parking lot, massive. Like 3 times the amount that is needed for something like that. And that's zoning and retail. Sears won't put a building in there, or Macy's or anybody else won't put a building in there unless you have 2.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of floor space or whatever it is. And if you don't meet their standards, they're not coming there. And the zoning ordinance, you know, is written to match that. So it's so commercial and greed, and everybody agrees there's 10 times the parking that you need. But I'm going off on a tangent there. So what could we do at that shopping center that would mimic nature even a little bit?
Something related to permeable surfaces and how water flows. So to try to avoid impermeation.
So infiltration of the stormwater on the site into the ground. Not pipe and pond off to somewhere, you know, dump it in a stream on somebody else's property, but keep it on the site. That's one. There's some clues up there.
Well, the reward cooperation, I don't know what animal, I mean, what kind of ants would be the animals I'd look at, and I don't know enough about ants, but I know they're really busy moving that sand around. And I would think that they have some behavior that is cooperative in that respect. I don't know if they have a, you know, sort of.
Oh, there's a thing
chain.
about the hippo and the white birds.
Right.
You know, those white birds are always hanging out on the hippo because the hippo gets these bugs on it, and the white bird eats the bugs, and that's a symbiotic, mutually beneficial.
I mean, where I would want to end up, and I'm sort of doing it backwards instead of looking to the animal world for inspiration. I'm thinking where I want to end up and thinking, is there an inspiration there track down, which is you create a hub where you have constant shuttle buses running back and forth, so that you can minimize the amount of parking and take people back and forth on a shuttle bus to the parking.
So that's reward cooperation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have to find
You
an
can
animal
even
that does that.
simplify it to say shared parking. In Fairfax, we were trying so hard to get our zoning people to allow churches or places of worship and shopping centers to share parking. because their peak hours are not the same. That's rewarding cooperation, okay? So, and it reduces the amount of impervious surface. So, anything else? Well,
I
time
was
is
thinking
place.
about the bank on diversity, so you can make
Okay.
sure that you have space for bicycles.
Variety of transportation options,
or
make sure that
make
it's
there's safe
walkable.
pathways.
Okay, yeah, I'd take that. So this is what you're gonna be doing in your second assignment, is figuring out, you know, what things either are already on the site that are positives. Yes, they recycle everything, they even compost, you know, a lot of schools these days, you know, very little trash leaves the property because they're composting the food, they're using real plates, you know, those kind of things. So maybe your project doesn't recycle everything, and you could find a way, and then that's one of your 3 design solutions is you add a place for them to do composting, you know, a process by which, you know, how would you change the minds of people to get them to do this? Because not everybody's going to be on board, that kind of thing. So does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Let's go to the next one here. So human vitality. It's all about us. So what kinds of things on a project could you see that were either good or bad? It was designed for humans, it wasn't designed for humans, in concert with nature.
I was gonna say like accessible ramps for parking, or I guess I don't really know how that fits with nature.
Well, it's a little bit about the equality between humans and nature, equality between humans in and of ourselves, but also bringing nature into it. To me, it's anything that's not designed at a proper human scale. Like a trail that's properly, you know, pruned out and, you know, that's a human scale. Another example.
Yeah, I was thinking about some buildings that I know that are, good on the LEED scale, and one of the attributes, like, is an atrium that is really, really an amazing atrium that is truly populated, and you feel like you're outside. And so when you're in the building, because the window spaces tend to be very big, a lot of open, that you feel like you're outside even though you're inside, and you're bringing the outside in.
So that would be a good aspect of the design of that project, because they said, you know what? Humans need contact with nature. So we're going to make sure that's part of our building design. Let me do one on the last one. Laws that are good for nature are good for people too. Remember what example I used, the stream buffers? So what if your project was next to a stream, did not require a stream buffer by the development regulations, and you know, they came in and cleared it or did whatever. And you said, well, we're going to go back in and we're going to do a regenerative design to put that buffer back in, stabilize it, and you know, give it a long-term permanent solution. And we're also going to make it a little sanctuary with a couple of benches. Bam. That's how you get laws that are, you know, things that happen for nature are good for people too. It's always easier to get a green design if you push it and from the angle of humans need this, and you know, it's going to be good for people as well as good for the environment. I'm sorry, you were trying to.
Yeah, and I was going to say one other thing, and I'm not sure if Fulton's category is making the perimeter of the building at the street level inviting for pedestrians to walk by. So that you have trees and shade and some interest at the pedestrian level, so that people choose to walk rather than take other transportation.
Right, making it an environment that they want to be in.
Right.
Yeah. So 7 generations. To me, this one's not that hard, but throw some out there. It's easier to start with a bad decision. So like, what would be?
There's a place in Oklahoma that they did a lot of mining, and so all of the leftover mining waste has now just been left in piles, and so the people who lived there were moved out I think by the EPA, and the EPA tried to fix it, and they spent a lot of money, and it did not work, and it also happens to be native ground, so now the land has been given back to the natives people so that they can figure out how to fix their problem.
And what people don't know is that mining, it's tailings, it's called, what's left over after they do the mining, at least from my experience in southern Illinois, it's very acid. And nothing will grow there. It's inert, basically.
Well, there's just these huge like mountains. So you drive through and it's kind of beautiful, but then like people also didn't know that it was dangerous. So one of my teachers said she used to like ride horses on these mountains with her when she was younger with like other people that lived in the area, and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of like lead.
Yeah, that's a real environmental justice issue, and I think that really relates to, you know, what did we know at, who remembers Love Canal and the nuclear waste, right? You know, that was a real thing that happened, and people were physically affected. Radiation is bad for humans, you know, and Chernobyl and all those things. And it's not just the generation that gets impacted. You pass it along to your kids. So it's, you know, a multi-generational thing. If anyone in this room has not watched Erin Brockovich, I require that you watch that movie. Okay? It's on Netflix. Erin Brockovich. Have to watch it. Okay. Because water, to me, is a big 7 generations issue. Because there will always be water. It will always exist on the earth. It's not something that gets used up per se. There's a water cycle, right? We're going to talk about that a lot today. But the condition that it's in, the quality, the salinity, the volumes of water where we don't want it to be, we've got an obligation to at least 7 generations to keep that water as clean as we can. So to me, that's why so many of these pipeline decisions are so important, because pipelines burst every day. And you know, we go under, and I'm sure there's 100 pipelines under the Missouri and Mississippi River. There has to be to make those connections. But do we want to keep making those same decisions that aren't quite the best? Okay, so really be thinking about, I'd like some creative answers. The other 7 generations thing is of course, and I think you might have mentioned it, that you know, if it's a sacred site or it has some connection, in Prince George's County, we're always looking for any kind of connection to African American history there. There's very little architecture left or buildings that, you know, because mostly the slave quarters just were not very well built. So we're always looking for that kind of artifacts. And, you know, if someone came in and just didn't do an architectural review, you know what I mean, archaeological review, and look at the resources on the site, I mean, that would be disrespectful. Even if you don't think there's anything there, you got to at least look. You know, these areas have been inhabited by Europeans for 400 years. Europeans and Africans, frankly. So, you know, how do we make those histories part of the landscape that we keep going? You know, what was the coolest thing was working in Fairfax County and going out in the woods to look at sites that were about to be developed. So that was not the cool part. But my boss was a Civil War aficionado. So we'd go walking along and go, look at that trench right there. Because during the Civil War, they would go out and dig trenches that were embankments for battles. And you know, we're out by Bull Run and, you know, all these parts where big parts of the Civil War were fought. To me, that's part of the cultural landscape that shouldn't be messed with. And, you know, we should preserve that if we can. That's a 7 generations kind of thing. So think about that for your project. Was there something there that could have been preserved? Or is there something that could be, you know, rekindled, you know, a historical marker, you know, a way to pay homage to Okay, this is, to me, usually the easiest one, especially if you're working on a green building or something, you know. So much work has been done in this area about green power. So I won't make it, you know, do a shout out for these. If there was like one thing that you would recommend a building or somebody do, interior, exterior, something regarding energy, what might it be? Let's just throw out some ideas. Say again? Eco roofs, green roofs, vegetated roofs. Even simpler than that with regard to roofs? What could you do?
Solar panels.
Simpler than that.
Make sure the
Rainwater.
drains are clean, rainwater conservation.
Light.
Couple of cans of paint. Paint the roof white. Make it a reflective roof. That's one of the cheapest things that people can do. And you know what? Tar is black. I was, when I was in Chicago just before Christmas, I stayed with a friend of mine who's got a, you know, one of those, it's a separated unit, but kind of a row house-ish in Chicago, one of the old neighborhoods. And she's got this rooftop sanctuary that is just unbelievable. Service berry, her dog goes over and eats all the service berry right off the shrub and everything. But she said one of the hardest things was all of the sealants that she had to use were black. So, you know, she's like, they did some tile work where you can see through. Drainage is so important up there, right? Because she's getting everything Chicago winter. So just suffice that to say, light surfaces are an easy-ish fix if that's all you do, even. Yeah, and why don't they make white shingles? I mean, I guess they do. Maybe architects don't like them, but, you know, lighter color is definitely an easy fix. What else can you do for energy conservation? Right, right. Use natural light as much as you can. Bring natural light into a room. Control the light. If this was a south-facing window, we'd be baking in the afternoon. So we'd be bacon, like bacon, bacon. Being able to control, you know, we have 3 skylights in our house, which I really, really love. I love having all the natural light. But in the middle of summer, I wish they had shades in them that I could pull, because it's a little harsh. Even the moon, as it tracks across, you know, I'm like, moon, I'm trying to sleep. So any way to control the temperature. Drapes. Having drapes, curtains, keep energy in. I just noticed one of our French doors leaks on the bottom, so I'm going to get a nice looking kind of rolled up towel thing to put there. Does that, you know, help a little bit? Every little bit helps. So that's kind of what this is about. I'm hoping that you look at larger solutions like solar panels and those kind of things, but what if they've already done all those things? You know, how could you bring more natural light into the space? How can you bring more nature into a space? Those kind of things. Cool beans. Okay. So, holistic thinking principle. So how might you, so in this you can approach this one in a couple of different ways. If you know about the design process, like there was an Arlington Public Library that one of the former students was involved in the PTA and, you know, and all that stuff, and it ended up being fairly green. So she could talk about the process of, you know, they included everybody and it took 18 months because, you know, they had all these public meetings and, you know, that's good to know because people were involved, you know. Let me just say one thing about the land development process in general. Citizens find out about land development applications at the worst possible time, when they could be least effective. And that's when the public hearing is scheduled, if there is a public hearing. For just a straight up permit, you don't have a public hearing, but if it's a rezoning or something big, people don't hear about it. Well, after 10 years of fighting our administration, we in Prince George's County finally have an online notification that you can go in and say, I want to know about any new development applications when they're accepted. Bam! Completely different process. Because what happens is a subdivision application gets accepted and the staff works on it, and the staff works on it, and we negotiate with the developers, and we go through all this stuff, and we come up with a staff's recommendation, and then we schedule it for the public hearing, and then a sign goes up on the property. That's the first time that adjacent property owners find out about it. That's 30 days before the public hearing. Everything's already been negotiated. This is typical. I'm not saying this is just where I work. This is very typical. So citizens really have to insert themselves and be very active in finding out what's going on. So if where you live does not have this notification process, it sends you an email way back here, and you're interested in what's going on around you, you should ask for it, because it's not that hard. It's like $10,000 in programming, and it's up, and it's self-sufficient. So yay, score 1 for the citizens. But, so that's where you have to look at the process and go, was the process fair? Was the process inclusive? Did they, was the greening of the architecture a last minute thought? Or was it part of the process all the way through? Was whatever retrofit project you might be looking at, did they open the view of that, hey, we got to retrofit this little thing? Did they look at where that little thing fits in the larger context? And if they had, how would their design have been different? So that's what I'm looking for in that second assignment. What led to the decisions that were made? Or who, as much as you can, process, this is the hardest one, because you may not know the process that went into that decision. So there's lots of ways to address this. So let's say you wanted to do one for an elementary school or a library or something, and you didn't know what the process was. I would expect you to go find out what the land development process is, do a little bit of research on what process they would have gone through, and say a little bit about that. And just say, it's not clear how this came to be a school, but the process that they would have likely have gone through is blah, blah, blah. The product might have been improved if they had held, additional community meetings and done some design charrettes. I love design charrettes. It puts people in front of maps with markers, and people love that. They do. They eat that stuff up. If you orient them well on the map and say, like, here's your house, here's where the school is, they love it. So how can the process be different? So, and if you're struggling with any of these while you're writing, just email me and we can brainstorm through it. But it's good to think about how you might change the process. Okay. So for this principle, I would like you to do a little bit of research, not a ton. This is a 2-credit course and you have 2 assignments, so I'm not expecting you to do a full bioregion analysis for your little site. But I would like you to, give me some idea. This is in the Chesapeake Bay region, it's in the Patuxent watershed, it's eastern deciduous forest, or you've got an urban site, there's not any native vegetation here, but nearby there's a park that has which probably existed on this site previously, that kind of thing. Do some research, start to get familiar with the resources in the area where you will likely do your watershed journal. If you're in Arlington County, Fairfax County, wherever you might be, get on their website, start seeing what information they have available. Do not go down the wormhole. Do you know what I mean? Don't spend 20 hours researching stuff about the ecology of your site, okay? Keep it reasonable. But I need you to start using those tools so that later in the program, you know, you have a little bit of familiarity with how to do that, yeah.
So for assignment 2, we're gonna pick a site. It doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be in the watershed that we ultimately adopt.
I'm sorry, I did not make that clear.
Okay.
You are right, you are
Okay.
right. For assignment 2, it could be anywhere. If it happens to be in the watershed or near your house, that's great. But your watershed journal is going to be a place you go back to. This is separate from that. That's why we kind of don't talk about the watershed journals in my class, because it's a separate thing from the introduction.
And then, the site that we picked, is it your preference that we pick one from the list, or that we go and find one on our own?
Either, I have no preference.
But it has to be something from the US, GBC website that's been rated by Leeds or
No,
something?
no, doesn't
Okay.
have to be. It could be your corner library that just did a whole renovation and
That's
tried to institute some
Okay,
green practices, and, you know, you don't think they did a very good job.
okay.
What could I think of from where I live? There was a gas station that just did a whole retrofit. It's really cool. It's like from the 60s, and they have neon signs and stuff, but they did no landscaping. And all the water just runs right off the site. It's 100% impervious surface. So that's a site where I could go, you know what, you really missed an opportunity here. And here's some things that you could do to make it more green, blah, blah, blah. And here's, you know, holistic, you know, the process thing. Did you include the beautification club of the town of Williamsburg? No. Did you, you know, you see what I mean in looking at a project? Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. It's not a long paper. What did I say?
Is this
11
assignment 2 or
pages?
assignment 1? I'm sorry.
Assignment 2,
Okay.
yeah. Remember, assignment 1 is your philosophy.
Right, that's what I thought.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm trying to do a good job of kind of prepping you for these assignments as we're walking through this. So make it more of an effort. So does that make sense? And I know I'm not giving you a very good answer, but it's somewhere between here and here, the amount of research you should do. If you're doing a project that's an eco-preserve that just did, you know, something cool, well then, okay, that would make sense to do a little more research on this particular principle. So that would be helpful. All right, let's take a break, stretch our legs.